Welcome to the Making of Me podcast, where we explore personal growth, identity, mental wellness. Today's guest is Lacey Kelly, licensed therapist and author of The Process of Unbecoming. Lacey helps people understand why following all the right steps in self-improvement, therapy, personal development, nervous system work can still leave them feeling something is wrong. She offers a fresh perspective grounded in psychology, nervous system awareness, and self-understanding, challenging the assumption of traditional self-improvement culture. It's really a pleasure and honor to have you on the show, Lisa.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you. So, Lisa, what were some of the experiences or challenges that shape you into who you have become today?
So I have always been a bit of an existential thinker and wondering what the point of life is without sounding too morbid or depressing. And it kind of set me off to be on a really deep quest to understand purpose and connection and just how to feel good here. And so naturally, it took me into a lot of self help spaces, not just in therapy or self improvement, but in new age and spirituality. I mean, you name it, I have probably tried to find some kind of peace in that world and realm. And what I found over and over was the same core idea and same principle that aligned with my thinking, which is there's something wrong with me and I need fixing. And if I could just figure out the right thing, then I would feel better. If I could just figure out the right technique, the right practice, the right anything, then I'll just feel more settled. And it never actually happened. And when I became a therapist, I saw the same thing in my clients, the same urge and yearning to just feel better. And they were going down all the same paths I had. And so it got me questioning the premise that we're all starting from, which is this idea that we're somehow incomplete as we are. We're somehow broken and need fixing. And I found personally, and then I saw in working with my clients, that when we address that foundational premise, that core belief we're working with, and we start there and work to change the ground we're standing on, everything else just kind of unfolds and follows suit a lot more effortlessly. So it really has helped me and other people get out of the striving and the trying to be different and feel different.
So, can you explain the core idea behind the process of unbecoming?
Yeah. So kind of following up on what I just said, a lot of our culture emphasizes the idea of brokenness or not good enoughness or somehow feeling incomplete. And it's maybe a little bit of the pessimist in me, but I think there's financial reasons for that. I think in consumerism, it's very common to pick on people's insecurities, that the deeper feelings that they know we're feeling, and try to sell us the solution. And so culture kind of has to organize around this idea that we're incomplete and then offer you a solution that's usually really expensive to become more complete. And the process of unbecoming gets us to question that ground of, am I actually incomplete? Am I not whole as I am? Am I unworthy? And if so, if I believe that, why? And challenging the idea that that's true at all. So the process of unbecoming can be a little bold in that it just kind of tells you that's not true. You actually
Yeah,
are inherently whole and inherently worthy as a person, and that humans are born with vulnerability that makes us worthy of belonging. I mean, you can see it in the way people approach a newborn. The whole room organizes around the precious life in the room, and we don't lose that. So the process of unbecoming says, no, you are whole and worthy as a person. You have inherent dignity in just being born, and offers a way to tap into that again and change that ground that people are operating from.
oh, this is really a whole lot. While you were sharing, a whole lot of thoughts were just coming to mind, being that, yeah, you're questioning a whole lot of stuff, being that our society gets kind of, yeah, made us feel that something is wrong. And after we see that what is wrong, we sell us a product. Or more like peg a price tag to it. At the end of the day, we keep going through that particular cycles. And it just dawned on me that, oh, why aren't we questioning everything? Why do we have to need this? Why do we have to go through the education system? Why do we have to go through this? Why this and why that? So, yeah, this is a lot. This is amazing. Also, how does identity form through adaptation? And why can that make people feel stuck?
Yeah, good question. So with personality development and identity, it happens alongside each other in childhood. And we're born developing, we develop our sense of self through childhood, and we have to adapt to the environment that we're in. And it's another inherent quality of being human is that we adapt to our environment, and we're really good at it. Humans are extraordinary at adapting to conditions. It doesn't matter what the conditions are, we will adapt. And throughout human history, the adaptations or the environment we've been adapting to have largely been terrain, weather, location, tribal dynamics. And it's only in our modern history that we're adapting to the single family home. And so we're adapting to the emotional weather of a home and what brings belonging to us and what pushes that belonging away. So, in absence of some of those other more physiological survival threats of predators and weather and shelter and things like that, for most of us in our first world, we have some of those more basic needs met. And so the next layer of threat comes with being exiled from the group, right? Being pushed away, being rejected. So our identity organizes around the adaptation to belonging and connection in our single family home. And because that adaptation happens alongside personality development, it can feel like those adaptations we had to take to feel like we belong are actually who we are, when really they were a set of adaptations for a certain environment and a set of conditions that as we age and grow up and move out and develop our own relationships, those adaptations may not be necessary anymore. So those patterns that play out a lot of the time are the things people come to therapy for, whether it's like people pleasing or shutting down in a conflict or developing some kind of withdrawal system from connection are the adaptations we needed early on. And usually the things that get labeled as pathological or like something's wrong with me. But really, they're just kind of outdated adaptations,
Yeah.
and we just need to catch our body up to current time and current relationships and adapt to something new. So that's kind of why people can feel stuck in it. They're very deeply ingrained because it happened alongside that personality development, but it doesn't mean it's actually who you are. It's just a relational template that formed for the environment of your single family home and then needs to update once you're out of that.
What is the role of nervous system in our sense of self and personal growth?
So our nervous system is such a amazing quality and feature of any mammal, but it's the system that registers threat or safety. And as I said, before, when we were living in very different conditions, threat and safety was a lot more physiological. And that is still a reality for some people, even in the first world. If they're in very abusive homes or they're experiencing some kind of scarcity of resources or something of that sort. But for a lot of us, our nervous system now starts to register emotional threat as the same level of threat as a predator or something of that sort. So when we go through that kind of emotional roller coaster, so to speak, of is this safe, is this not safe, over and over in our body, that's how we start to, those patterns can get so deeply ingrained because we're developing not just a mental pattern, but a physiological response to things that might feel familiar when we encounter those similar conditions again. So, for example, if we grew up in a home where there may have been anger outbursts or something of the sort, our body is going to experience a certain kind of flare or physiological response when we experience anger as an adult. So it might feel like we're in that situation again, even though it's a totally different time with a completely different capacity of our body and our ability to respond. So nervous system development and all of it, just like identity, and when we're forming our sense of self alongside those adaptations, we're also forming our physiological responses inside those adaptations, which is why they can feel so hard to change.
Amazing, amazing. So how can someone distinguish between patterns that are adaptive versus a pattern that are genuinely need intervention?
Pattern that needs intervention or needs to change would be something that you are struggling in your current relationships with. So if you're experiencing a pattern that's causing distress in your present day relationships, for example, if you really want to feel connected to someone or to people, but you tend to isolate because maybe your relational template early on told you that if I put myself out there, I'm going to be criticized. So then you develop a pattern of avoiding criticism by just avoiding interaction. But really, you want to be connected. That would be a pattern that you'd want to work with and start to shift. And in the process of unbecoming, we don't really go in through the door of the pattern. We go in through the door of the premise. So it's the foundational beliefs that you're carrying that are giving life to that pattern. that we work with,
Hmm.
and that the most effective way to change is through relationship, not through effort. So it uses a very different intervention than a lot of self help and self improvement culture teaches.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. The foundation has to kind of they look into the play compared to just the template. Yeah, amazing. Thank you for sharing. So, what is one what common mistake do people make when approaching healing or personal development?
I would say, well, it's tough because a lot of people approach healing or personal development because they think something's wrong. You wouldn't
Yeah,
go into self help or self improvement unless you felt like you needed help in improving. And until we really work with that belief, it tends to be a self feeding cycle. So if I'm going into therapy or self improvement, because let's say I've feel like I'm too dysregulated in conflict. Like I react too strongly, my reactions are disproportionate to a situation. Okay, well, there's something wrong with me. I need to go get help. And then you go get help and you go talk to somebody and they say, yeah, that's not right. We should fix that. And so now you're starting this path of confirmation. Yeah, there's something wrong with me and there's things I can do to fix it. So then the next time you have a disproportionate reaction, you take it as evidence that you're failing and there's still something wrong with you, unless you might need to continue on the path. I would say that paradigm just kind of creates a little bit of burnout and fatigue because we can unknowingly go into it with an expectation that we're going to therapy ourselves out of being human, that we can somehow get to a place where we're just even all the time or feel peaceful and settled all of the time, or that if we're in that pattern again, then it means we haven't done enough work, and it can be really exhausting. So I think that's probably one of the biggest mistakes people can make, is thinking that the end goal is to not have the thing anymore that you're going in to get help for. You're still going to do it, but we have to change the relationship to it and change the ground we're starting on.
amazing, amazing. Thank you so much. Also, in your work, how do you balance psychological insights with compassion or everyday struggles?
Hmm. Um, I work really relationally with people. So when they're coming to me with patterns, in my clinical practice, I specialize in relationships.
Yeah,
So people are usually coming to me to talk about somebody else. That's
yeah,
usually how that goes. So I work relationally to essentially be that mirror where the change can happen. Because I don't really think that forcing or effort actually produces much change, I more so just reflect what I see or what I hear and just stay really curious about that person's experience. So I'm not really bringing much insight into the sessions or the way that I work. I'm just staying really in the relationship of it all because I found that
yeah.
that's what produces the most change.
Yeah, serving as a mirror so that they could actually get to change. Yeah,
Mhm.
amazing. Yeah, thank you. So, lastly, for my listener who feel exhausted by self improvement, what is the first step to reclaim their sense of self?
For people who are exhausted by self improvement, I would say the first thing they could do is to stop, just stop trying for a little while. Like put it down. I think that, we can become afraid to stop trying. We can become afraid to stop improving. And there's a lot of talk around that as well, like culturally. There's a feeling like if you're not doing the work or you're not growing enough, that you're like getting left behind or emotionally
Yeah,
immature or something of that sort. And it's just not the case. You got to live your life, You got to just put it down sometimes. What do the kids say now? Like go touch grass.
yeah,
Just put it down, connect with something else, and pick it up again when you feel a little more space so you can work on that ground, the premise that you're going in with.
yeah,
We can get really fixated on the self in our culture today. In some ways, it feels like the thing we all kind of fixate on that gives us some kind of control or meaning. But it can be very exhausting and defeating because the mechanisms we're using to try to change are all effort based and it just doesn't pan out the way a lot of people hope. So
yeah,
the first step would be to stop, go outside, take a breath, question the premise that you're starting on. What are you foundationally believing about yourself that you're taking in to the self improvement work? And start by questioning that. So get outside of the pattern or just the behavior and start to question the actual belief you have about yourself.
yeah, yeah. Amazing. Thank you so much. This has really been amazing conversation with you, and I must say it's a pleasure having you on the show. So, For my audience who would love to reach out to you with for the work you do, either for consulting, for coaching sections, or to get some of your material, how can they reach out to you and where's the best platform?
The best way is just my website. It's called theunbecominghub.com. And just go to that website and you can find all the links there to different social channels, my Substack, Instagram. I post weekly essays on Substack. I also record podcasts every week that are just solo, different thoughts about the topic. And so all of that lives on the hub.
Yeah, thank you so much. Definitely the link to the website will be on the show notes for the chat. Yeah, that's it. Thank you for offering us a deeply human perspective on change, identity, and personal growth, helping listener understand the feeling broken if it's often misunderstood rather than the truth. Yeah. For our audience who would love to reach out to her, check the show notes and reach out through the link that will be on the show notes. Once again, a pleasure and honor have you on the show.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.